The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with the usual mixture of languages, clicks, and electromagnetic pulses that served as communication among the 17 member species. Ambassador Zekthara of the Vorthak Empire lounged in his crystalline chair, his 6 eyes scanning the assembly with barely concealed contempt. The topic of discussion was always the same these days. The humans. They call themselves Earth's representatives. Zekthara's voice resonated through his translator, dripping with amusement. A single-planet species that has barely mastered interstellar travel, requesting membership in our ancient confederation. Across the circular chamber, the human delegation sat in their assigned corner. 3 figures in simple gray uniforms, looking impossibly small among the towering aliens around them. The lead ambassador, a middle-aged man named Chen, maintained his composure despite the obvious mockery. Beside him sat Dr. Sarah Martinez, the mission's chief scientist, and in the third chair, almost forgotten by everyone present, was communications specialist Elena Vasquez. Elena was 24 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. She had graduated top of her class from the Terra Communications Academy, but her achievements meant nothing here. To the Galactic Council, she was just another example of human mediocrity. Her job was simple: monitor communications, take notes, and remain invisible. The Zentaurian delegate, a being that resembled a walking tree with silver bark, raised one of its branch-like appendages. The humans have shown remarkable progress in the past century. It wheezed through its breathing apparatus. Perhaps we should consider their application more seriously. A wave of derisive laughter rippled through the chamber. The Krillian ambassador, a creature of pure energy contained within a mechanical shell, projected its thoughts directly into the translation matrix. Progress? They still fight among themselves over resources that could be synthesized easily. They poison their own atmosphere and oceans. They are children playing with toys they do not understand. Elena's fingers moved silently across her datapad, recording every word, every inflection. She had studied each species extensively during the 6-month journey to the council station. She knew their histories, their cultures, their technologies. More importantly, she understood their weaknesses, but nobody asked for her opinion. Nobody ever did. Ambassador Chen stood to address the council, his voice steady despite the hostile atmosphere. Honored delegates, humanity acknowledges our youth as a spacefaring species. We come not as equals in technology or experience, but as students eager to learn. We offer our unique perspectives, our creativity, and our determination to contribute to galactic peace. The response was predictable. Zekthara's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his kind. Creativity? Determination? These are not the currencies of power in the galaxy, human. Your species lacks the fundamental understanding of cosmic forces. You have no psychic abilities, no energy manipulation capabilities, no quantum consciousness. You are biological curiosities at best. Dr. Martinez shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Elena noticed the slight tremor in the scientist's hands, the way her breathing had become shallow. The systematic humiliation was taking its toll on all of them, but Elena remained calm. She had expected this. Humans had always been underestimated throughout their history, and it had often worked to their advantage. The session continued for hours, with delegate after delegate listing humanity's shortcomings. They were too aggressive yet too weak, too curious yet too ignorant, too unified in some ways yet too divided in others. Every human achievement was dismissed, every offer of cooperation rejected. As the formal session ended, Elena noticed something the others had missed. Small clusters of delegates gathering in corners, their communications shifting to encrypted channels. She activated her passive monitoring systems, designed to appear like standard note-taking equipment, but actually capable of intercepting and analyzing dozens of communication protocols simultaneously. What she discovered made her blood run cold. 3 separate species were planning coordinated attacks on human colonies. The Vorthak Empire wanted Earth's rare mineral deposits. The Krillian Collective sought to study human neural patterns for their consciousness transfer experiments. The Saurian Republic simply viewed humans as potential slaves for their mining operations. The attacks were scheduled to begin in 72 hours, timed to coincide with humanity's rejection from the Council. The vote was merely a formality. The real decision had been made long ago. Earth would be carved up among the major powers, and humanity would become either extinct or enslaved. Elena's mind raced through possibilities. The human delegation had no military escort, no means of rapid communication with Earth. By the time they could warn anyone through official channels, the attacks would already be underway. Billions of lives hung in the balance, and the only person who knew about the threat was a communications specialist that nobody took seriously. She looked at her colleagues, still processing their diplomatic humiliation, completely unaware of the genocide being planned around them. Ambassador Chen was reviewing his notes for tomorrow's expected rejection ceremony. Dr. Martinez was calculating how long their return journey to Earth would take. Neither of them noticed Elena quietly accessing the station's communication array through her supposedly limited equipment. The other delegates were filing out of the chamber, many of them already discussing the military preparations for the coming operation. They spoke freely, secure in their belief that the primitive humans couldn't possibly understand their advanced encryption methods or intercept their quantum-entangled communications. They were wrong. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire life being underestimated, overlooked, and dismissed. Teachers had called her quiet and unremarkable. Classmates had ignored her in favor of more outgoing personalities. Even her own family sometimes forgot she was in the room. But what they all failed to recognize was that being invisible had taught her to see everything. She had learned to read people, to understand systems, to find weaknesses that others missed. Her communication skills weren't just about technology. They were about understanding the fundamental ways that beings shared information, and more importantly, how they tried to hide it. As the chamber emptied, Elena remained in her seat, her fingers dancing across her equipment. She was no longer just monitoring communications, she was preparing for war. The galaxy had made a critical error in judgment. They had seen humanity's diplomatic approach and mistaken it for weakness. They had observed Earth's peaceful intentions and interpreted them as submission. But Elena Vasquez knew something that the advanced alien species had forgotten in their millennia of technological supremacy. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one nobody sees coming. The meek girl they had dismissed without a second thought was about to remind the galaxy why underestimating humanity was always a fatal mistake. The first shots of war were still 72 hours away, but Elena was already firing back in ways the Galactic Council couldn't even comprehend. Elena's equipment hummed quietly in the empty chamber, as streams of intercepted data flowed across her screens. The station's communication array was more sophisticated than anything on Earth, but it was also more complex, with more entry points for someone who understood how to exploit them. While the alien species had spent centuries perfecting their technology, they had grown complacent about security. The Vorthak military frequencies were the first to crack. Their encryption relied on quantum entanglement patterns that were nearly impossible to break using conventional methods. But Elena wasn't using conventional methods. She had discovered something during her studies that her professors had dismissed as theoretical nonsense. Human neural patterns could sometimes synchronize with quantum fields in ways that defied current scientific understanding. Elena closed her eyes and let her mind drift into the strange meditative state she had accidentally discovered as a child. Information flowed through her consciousness like water through a sieve, and slowly, patterns began to emerge. The Vorthak weren't just planning to attack human colonies. They were coordinating with mercenary fleets from the Outer Rim. The assault would come from multiple vectors, designed to overwhelm Earth's primitive defense systems in minutes. But as Elena delved deeper into their communications, she found something unexpected. The Vorthak were afraid. Their own intelligence reports painted a picture of human unpredictability that worried their military commanders. They had studied Earth's history and found patterns of behavior that didn't match any known alien psychology. Humans had a tendency to become exponentially more dangerous when cornered, and their capacity for rapid, Adaptation in crisis situations was unprecedented among known species. Elena smiled grimly as she read a classified Vorthak analysis titled Human Warfare. Anomalies. The Burr report detailed how humans had repeatedly overcome technologically superior enemies throughout their history through creative tactics, psychological warfare, and sheer determination. The Vorthak military was recommending overwhelming force specifically because they feared what might happen if humans had time to adapt. Moving on to the Krillian communications proved more challenging. As energy beings, their thought patterns were transmitted through electromagnetic frequencies that shifted constantly. But Elena had always been sensitive to electromagnetic fields, often experiencing headaches near powerful electronics that others couldn't detect. Now she channeled that sensitivity into understanding the Krillian communication matrix. The Krillian plans were even more disturbing than the Vorthak invasion. They intended to harvest human consciousness, believing that the unique neural patterns of Earth's population could enhance their own collective intelligence. They saw humans not as people, but as biological computers to be absorbed into their network. The process would leave the physical bodies alive but empty, creating a planet of mindless shells. Elena's hands trembled as she processed this information. She had always prided herself on maintaining emotional control, but the casual way the Krillians discussed enslaving billions of minds made her stomach churn. Their communications revealed that they had already performed similar harvests on 12 other primitive species, transforming entire civilizations into components of their collective consciousness. The Saurian Republic's plans were more straightforward but equally horrifying. They needed workers for their deep space mining operations, and humans were deemed suitable for the dangerous conditions that killed most other species. Their biological surveys indicated that human physiology could be modified to survive in environments that would destroy most alien life forms. They planned to capture entire cities worth of people and transport them to mining worlds in the galactic core. Elena forced herself to remain focused as she continued gathering intelligence. Each species had assigned specific targets. The Vorthak would take North America and Asia for their mineral wealth. The Krillians wanted Europe and Africa for their population density, and the Saurians claimed South America and Australia for their biological diversity. They had divided Earth like a meal among hungry predators. But Elena was finding weaknesses in their coordination. The three species were allies of convenience, not true partners. Their communications revealed mutual distrust and competing objectives. The Vorthak considered the Krillians to be dangerous fanatics whose energy-based existence made them unreliable allies. The Krillians viewed the Vorthak as primitive materialists obsessed with physical possessions. Both groups looked down on the Saurians as little more than sophisticated pirates. More importantly, Elena discovered that each species was secretly planning to double-cross the others after the human threat was eliminated. The Vorthak intended to seize Krillian energy farms. The Krillians wanted to absorb Vorthak consciousness into their collective. The Saurians were planning to raid both empires' outlying colonies, while their fleets were committed to the Earth operation. Elena began to formulate a plan. Direct communication with Earth was impossible. The station systems were monitored too closely, and any attempt to send a warning would be detected immediately. But Elena had spent years studying communication theory, and she understood that information could travel through indirect channels that monitoring systems often missed. She started with the station's environmental systems. The atmospheric processors used quantum resonance to maintain optimal breathing conditions for dozens of different species. Elena discovered that by introducing specific harmonic frequencies into the system, she could create patterns that would propagate through the station's entire network. To monitoring systems, it would appear as routine environmental adjustments. But to someone who knew how to decode the patterns, it would be a message. The problem was that nobody on Earth would know how to read her message. Elena needed to find a way to prepare them for what was coming, while simultaneously teaching them how to decode her warnings. She began work on a complex multi-layered signal that would appear as random static to automated systems but would contain recognizable mathematical sequences that human scientists could identify as artificial. As Elena worked, she overheard conversations between delegates as they passed through the chamber. The Vorthak ambassador was boasting to his aide about how the human delegation would be eliminated, along with their home world. ensuring that no witnesses survived to tell other species about the attack. The Krillian representative was discussing the technical challenges of consciousness harvesting on such a massive scale. The Saurian delegate was calculating the market value of human slaves in various galactic regions. Elena's anger grew with each casual discussion of genocide, but she channeled that rage into her work. The signal patterns became more sophisticated, more elegant. She embedded mathematical proofs that would immediately catch the attention of Earth's scientific community, followed by astronomical data that would pinpoint the locations of the attacking fleets, and finally tactical information about alien weapon systems and defensive capabilities. But Elena's most crucial discovery came when she accessed the station's historical archives. The Galactic Council had faced extinction-level threats before, and each time they had survived by adopting technologies and strategies from the species they had initially dismissed as primitive. The pattern was clear. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had all begun as underestimated outsiders who proved their worth through desperate innovation. Elena realized that the Council's rejection of humanity wasn't based on genuine assessment of human capabilities. It was based on fear. The established powers recognized something in human nature that threatened their dominance, and they were moving to eliminate that threat before it could fully develop. The knowledge gave Elena hope, but it also added urgency to her mission. Humanity had perhaps 70 hours before the attacks began, and Elena was the only person in position to warn them. She was a communications specialist that nobody noticed, working with equipment that everyone assumed was primitive, fighting to save a species that the galaxy had already written off as irrelevant. But Elena Vasquez had spent her entire life being underestimated, and she was about to show the Galactic Council exactly why that was their first and final mistake. The Meek girl they had dismissed was preparing to coordinate humanity's response to the greatest threat in their history, and she was going to do it without any of the aliens realizing what was happening until it was far too late. Elena's modified environmental signals had been transmitting for 18 hours when she detected the first response from Earth. Hidden within routine scientific data streams from the Arecibo research station, she found the mathematical acknowledgement she had been hoping for. Dr. Rebecca Chen, a quantum physicist and the ambassador's younger sister, had recognized the artificial patterns and was attempting to establish communication. The response was cautious but unmistakable. Rebecca had embedded her reply within atmospheric data from weather satellites, using prime number sequences that Elena had taught her during a communication theory lecture 3 years earlier. Elena felt a surge of relief and pride. Rebecca had not only identified the signal, but had remembered their old academic discussions about steganographic communication methods. Elena quickly encoded a more detailed message, layering it within the station's routine maintenance reports. She transmitted the attack timeline, fleet compositions, and target assignments, followed by everything she had learned about alien weapon systems and defense protocols. But most importantly, she included her analysis of the fundamental weaknesses in the alien alliance. The three attacking species had never fought together before. Their technologies were incompatible, their command structures were rigid, and their coordination protocols were vulnerable to disruption. Elena had identified 17 specific points where human interference could cause cascading failures throughout their combined fleet operations. As Elena continued her covert communication with Earth, she maintained her cover by performing her assigned duties perfectly. She attended briefings, filed reports, and remained invisible to the alien delegates who discussed their genocide plans around her as if she were a piece of furniture. Her ability to remain unnoticed had become her greatest weapon. During a strategy session between the three allied species, Elena learned about the technological advantages they believed made their victory inevitable. The Vorthak possessed gravitational weapons that could crush entire cities from orbit. The Krillians could disable electronic systems across vast distances using electromagnetic pulse attacks. The Saurians had developed biotoxins specifically designed to incapacitate human nervous systems without causing permanent damage to their future slaves. But Elena also discovered the limitations of these weapons. The gravitational devices required massive energy consumption and couldn't be fired rapidly. The electromagnetic pulses would also disable the attacker's own systems if used too close to their fleets. The biotoxins were vulnerable to common Earth antibiotics, though the aliens didn't know this because they had never encountered human medical technology. Elena transmitted these weaknesses to Earth, along with detailed technical specifications she had extracted from the aliens' own tactical databases. She was essentially giving humanity a complete intelligence briefing on their enemies' capabilities, something that should have been impossible for a species that supposedly lacked advanced technology. The alien delegates continued to underestimate human ingenuity, even as Elena demonstrated it before their eyes. During a discussion about human communication limitations, the Vorthak ambassador complained that humans were too primitive to decode quantum-encrypted messages. Elena smiled quietly as she simultaneously cracked his personal communication device and downloaded his complete mission orders. On Earth, Rebecca Chen had assembled a crisis response team that included military strategists, xenobiologists, and engineering specialists. Elena's communications had reached the highest levels of Earth's government within hours, and emergency protocols were being implemented across all human colonies and space stations. But Elena's most significant contribution was yet to come. She had discovered that the Alien Alliance's battle plans relied on a centralized command network that coordinated all three fleets through quantum entanglement communicators. If that network could be disrupted at the right moment, the entire invasion force would lose coordination and become vulnerable to defeat in detail. The challenge was that the network was protected by security systems that exceeded current human technology by centuries. However, Elena had found an unexpected vulnerability. The system's designers had never encountered a species that could interface directly with quantum fields using biological neural patterns. Elena's strange ability to synchronize with quantum communications wasn't just useful for interception. It might allow her to actively manipulate the network. Elena began preparing for the most dangerous part of her mission. She would need to wait until the attacking fleets were committed to their approach vectors, then use her neural interface capabilities to inject chaos into their command systems. The timing would be critical. Too early and they would detect the sabotage and adapt. Too late, and Earth's defenses would already be overwhelmed. As Elena worked on the technical details of her planned network intrusion, she received another message from Earth. Rebecca had successfully coordinated with military commanders, and humanity was preparing defenses that the aliens couldn't possibly expect. Earth's industrial capacity was being converted to military production at a rate that had impressed even the human leadership. But more importantly, Rebecca's message included intelligence that Elena's transmissions had made possible. Human scientists had reverse-engineered alien technology from Elena's specifications and were developing countermeasures. Gravitational shields based on human understanding of dark matter physics, electromagnetic hardening using techniques developed for solar storm protection, medical countermeasures for the biotoxins using Earth's advanced pharmaceutical research. Elena realized that she was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history. A supposedly primitive species was preparing to defend itself against technologically superior enemies, using intelligence gathered by one of their own operatives working deep behind enemy lines. The aliens had completely failed to recognize the threat that Elena represented, and that blindness was going to cost them everything. The Galactic Council continued its sessions, formally rejecting humanity's membership application and discussing the administrative details of dividing Earth's resources among the three allied empires. Elena sat in her assigned seat, taking notes and appearing to pay attention while simultaneously coordinating humanity's defense against their planned genocide. During a break in the proceedings, the Krillian ambassador approached the human delegation. Its mechanical shell projected harmonic frequencies that the translation matrix converted into words. "Your species shows promise," it said to Ambassador Chen. "Perhaps there might be opportunities for limited cooperation after the Council reaches its final decision." Elena kept her expression neutral as the energy being essentially offered to make humanity's enslavement more comfortable. Ambassador Chen responded diplomatically, unaware that Elena had already decoded the Krillian's true intentions. The alien was evaluating whether human consciousness patterns were worth harvesting or if their minds were too primitive to enhance the collective. That evening, Elena sent her final detailed intelligence package to Earth. She had mapped the entire alien command structure, identified key personnel, and located critical vulnerabilities in their fleet formations. She had also discovered something that would give humanity a decisive advantage. The attacking species had never developed countermeasures for human psychological warfare because they had never encountered a species that relied so heavily on deception and misdirection in combat. Elena included recommendations for exploiting this weakness. Fake communications, decoy installations, and false surrender signals could create confusion among alien forces that expected direct, logical responses to military situations. Humans' capacity for creative lying and strategic misdirection was entirely outside the aliens' experience. As Elena prepared for the final phase of her mission, she reflected on the irony of her situation. The entire Galactic Council saw humanity as weak and irrelevant. Yet one human woman had infiltrated their most secure facilities, stolen their military secrets, and was preparing to sabotage their command networks. The Meek girl they had dismissed without a second thought was about to demonstrate that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their ability to adapt, improvise, and overcome impossible odds through sheer determination and creative thinking. The attack began exactly as Elena had predicted. Long-range sensors throughout the Sol system detected massive fleet movements as 3 separate armadas dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory. The Vorthak Empire's crystalline warships emerged first, their gravitational weapons already charging for orbital bombardment. The Krillian Collective followed, their energy-based vessels crackling with electromagnetic power. Finally, the Saurian Republic's biomechanical ships materialized, their hulls pulsing with organic weaponry designed for capture rather than destruction. Elena monitored the invasion from her position in the council chamber, where the alien delegates had gathered to observe what they expected to be humanity's final hours. Massive holographic displays showed real-time footage from the attacking fleets, while the assembled aliens discussed the division of Earth's resources as if the outcome were already decided. But Elena knew something they didn't. Humanity had spent the past 72 hours preparing for this moment with information that should have been impossible for them to obtain. As the alien fleets moved into attack formation, they were walking into a trap that had been designed specifically for their capabilities and weaknesses. The Vorthak fleet was the first to discover that their enemies were not as primitive as expected. As their lead ships moved into optimal firing position for their gravitational weapons, they encountered something that shouldn't have existed: gravitational shields. The human defense platforms began generating counter-gravitational fields that neutralized the Vorthak's primary advantage while simultaneously disrupting their ship formations. Ambassador Zekthera's 6 eyes widened in shock as he watched his empire's most advanced weapons prove ineffective against human technology that had supposedly been developed in just 3 days. The gravitational shields were crude by Vorthak standards, but they were functional, and their very existence meant that humanity possessed scientific knowledge that the intelligence reports had completely missed. The Krillian response was equally surprised. Their electromagnetic pulse weapons, designed to disable all electronic systems within several light minutes, struck hardened human installations that had been specifically shielded against their attack methods. Earth's orbital defense stations continued operating normally while the aliens struggled to understand how such young species could have developed countermeasures for technologies they had never encountered. Elena watched the alien delegates begin to panic as their carefully planned invasion met unexpected resistance. The saurian biotoxins, released into Earth's atmosphere through atmospheric penetrators, proved completely ineffective as human medical centers distributed pre-prepared antidotes to the entire population within hours of exposure. But Elena's greatest contribution was yet to be revealed. As the 3 alien fleets struggled with their failing attack plans, their commanders began relying more heavily on their quantum-entangled communication network to coordinate their response. The system was designed to be unhackable, protected by security protocols that had never been breached in galactic history. Elena had been waiting for this moment. As communication traffic through the quantum network reached peak density, she activated her neural interface with the station's communication array. The strange ability that had made her an outcast among human communications specialists now became humanity's ultimate weapon. Elena's consciousness merged with the quantum communication streams, allowing her to perceive the entire alien command structure as a vast web of interconnected nodes. She could see every order being transmitted, every status report being filed, every strategic decision being made. More importantly, she could manipulate the information flowing through the network. Elena began her sabotage carefully, introducing small errors and delays that would appear as normal communication lag to automated monitoring systems. She altered tactical coordinates by tiny amounts, causing Vorthak gravitational weapons to miss their targets. She delayed Krillian pulse attacks until their own ships had moved into the blast radius. She redirected Saurian bioweapons to strike uninhabited regions instead of population centers. The effects were subtle at first, but as the battle continued, the accumulated errors began to cascade through the alien command structure. Orders were misunderstood, positions were misreported, and coordination between the three species began to break down. The careful synchronization that had made their joint attack possible was deteriorating into chaos. Elena pushed deeper into the network, her neural patterns synchronizing with quantum fields that alien scientists didn't even know existed. She found the core command nodes for each fleet and began introducing more aggressive sabotage. Vorthak ship captains received orders to fire on Krillian vessels that were supposedly infected with human cyber weapons. Krillian commanders were told that Saurian ships had been compromised and needed to be neutralized. Saurian fleet leaders received intelligence, indicating that their allies were planning to betray them after the Earth operation concluded. The alien delegates in the council chamber watched in growing horror as their invasion fleets began firing on each other. What had started as a coordinated attack on humanity had devolved into a three-way battle between former allies. Elena continued her manipulation of their communications, amplifying existing suspicions and turning their mutual distrust into open warfare. Ambassador Chen and Dr. Martinez sat in stunned silence as the holographic displays showed alien warships destroying each other with devastating efficiency. They had no idea that their quiet communications specialist was single-handedly orchestrating the enemy's self-destruction. From her seat just meters away, Elena felt the strain of maintaining her neural interface with the quantum network. Human brains weren't designed for direct quantum manipulation, and the effort was taking a severe toll on her physical systems. Blood trickled from her nose as she pushed her consciousness deeper into alien communication protocols. But she maintained her focus on the mission. The tide of battle was turning decisively in humanity's favor. Earth's defense forces, armed with detailed intelligence about alien capabilities, were exploiting every weakness Elena had identified. Human fighter pilots used unpredictable attack patterns that confused alien targeting systems. Ground-based weapons struck alien vessels at their most vulnerable points. Medical teams neutralized bioweapons faster than the aliens could deploy them, but Elena's greatest victory came when she gained access to the aliens' strategic databases through their compromised communication network. She downloaded complete technical specifications for alien technologies, star charts showing the locations of their homeworlds and colonies, and detailed intelligence about other species in the galaxy. In the space of a single battle, humanity had acquired centuries' worth of scientific and military knowledge. Elena transmitted this treasure trove of information to Earth while simultaneously using it to coordinate more effective attacks against the alien fleets. She identified command ships, supply vessels, and communication relays, then guided human forces to priority targets that would maximize damage to enemy capabilities. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as delegates realized that their supposedly inevitable victory had become a devastating defeat. The three most powerful military forces in the local galaxy were being systematically destroyed by a species they had dismissed as primitive. Worse, their secure communication networks had been compromised by technology that shouldn't have existed. Elena smiled grimly as she watched alien ambassadors frantically trying to contact their home governments. Their quantum-entangled communicators were still connected to the network she was manipulating, which meant she could monitor and alter their diplomatic communications as easily as their military orders until the Meek girl that nobody had noticed was about to ensure that the galaxy would never underestimate humanity again. But first, she needed to complete her mission and make sure that Earth's unexpected victory would lead to lasting security, rather than temporary respite. The aliens had shown their true intentions, and Elena was going to make sure the entire galaxy knew exactly what the supposedly civilized Galactic Council had attempted to do to her species. The battle in Earth's solar system raged for 6 hours before the surviving alien ships began their retreat. Elena maintained her neural connection to their communication networks throughout the engagement, ensuring that every attempt at regrouping or coordinated withdrawal failed. The 3 alien fleets that had arrived expecting easy conquest limped away with less than 30% of their original forces intact. But Elena wasn't finished with her manipulation of alien communications. As the defeated fleet struggled to reach safe hyperspace jump points, she began broadcasting their complete operational records to every communication relay in the galactic network. Within hours, detailed evidence of the planned genocide was spreading throughout civilized space. The evidence was undeniable. Elena transmitted recorded conversations between alien commanders discussing the enslavement and extermination of humanity. She revealed the secret agreements to divide Earth's population and resources. Most damaging of all, she exposed the Galactic Council's knowledge and approval of the entire operation. Elena watched with satisfaction as chaos erupted throughout the galactic communication network. Species that had been neutral or supportive of the 3 attacking empires suddenly found themselves questioning the entire foundation of galactic civilization. The evidence Elena had broadcast showed that the supposedly civilized Galactic Council was nothing more than a predatory alliance that eliminated potential competitors before they could challenge the established order. In the council chamber, panic had replaced the earlier confidence. Alien delegates scrambled to contact their home governments, trying to distance themselves from the failed invasion. But Elena was monitoring and recording every communication, building an even more comprehensive picture of galactic politics and corruption. The Xentorian delegate, the tree-like being who had initially spoken in favor of humanity, approached the human delegation with obvious distress. "Ambassador Chen," it wheezed through its breathing apparatus, "my government had no knowledge of the planned attack. We would never have supported such actions." Elena almost laughed at the obvious lie. She had intercepted Xentorian communications that showed their government had been promised a share of human biological samples for their genetic research programs, but she remained silent, continuing to appear as nothing more than a note-taking communications specialist, while she gathered evidence of universal complicity in the planned genocide. "Ambassador," Chen maintained his diplomatic composure despite the revolutionary developments. "The human delegation appreciates your concern," he replied carefully. "We look forward to discussing these matters with the full council when circumstances permit." Elena admired the ambassador's restraint. He had no idea that his communications specialist had just orchestrated the greatest intelligence coup in galactic history, but he was instinctively buying time for humanity to consolidate their unexpected advantages. Dr. Martinez was less successful at hiding her emotions. She stared at the holographic displays showing the retreating alien fleets with obvious shock and confusion. Elena realized that her colleagues still didn't understand what had happened. They knew that Earth had somehow repelled a massive invasion, but they had no idea how such a victory had been possible. Elena decided it was time to enlighten them. She activated her datapad and sent a coded message to both Ambassador Chen and Dr. Martinez, using a simple encryption method she had taught them during their journey to the council station. The message contained a brief summary of her activities and a request for an emergency private meeting. Both of her colleagues received the message within seconds, and Elena saw their expressions change as they read her explanation. Ambassador Chen's diplomatic mask slipped for just a moment, revealing genuine astonishment. Dr. Martinez actually gasped audibly before catching herself and looking around to see if anyone had noticed. Elena followed up with a more detailed transmission that included the complete intelligence database she had stolen from the alien networks: star charts, technological specifications, diplomatic communications, military capabilities, economic data, and political structures for every major species in the galaxy. Humanity had just acquired the equivalent of several centuries' worth of exploration and research in a single day. But Elena's most significant discovery was the revelation that humanity was not the first species to face attempted genocide by the Galactic Council. The archives contained records of at least a dozen other civilizations that had been destroyed or enslaved when they showed potential to challenge the established order. The galaxy's supposed commitment to peace and cooperation was a lie designed to lull potential threats into complacency. Elena transmitted this historical evidence to Earth along with her recommendations for humanity's next steps. Earth needed to consolidate its technological gains quickly, establish defensive alliances with other oppressed species, and prepare for the inevitable counterattack from the established galactic powers. As Elena worked on her final intelligence package, she noticed that her neural connection to the alien communication networks was beginning to destabilize. The sustained quantum interface was causing severe neurological damage, and she could feel her consciousness fragmenting under the strain. She had perhaps an hour before her brain would no longer be able to maintain the connection. Elena used that hour to maximum effect. She identified every military installation, supply depot, and command center belonging to the three attacking empires. She mapped their trade routes, diplomatic relationships, and internal political tensions. Most importantly, she located other species that had suffered under galactic oppression and could potentially become allies in humanity's fight for survival. The neural strain was becoming unbearable, but Elena pushed herself to complete one final task. She accessed the Council Station's central database and planted a quantum virus of her own design. The virus would lay dormant until the next time the Galactic Council attempted to coordinate a military operation against any species. When activated, it would broadcast complete operational details to every communication network in the galaxy, ensuring that no future genocide could be conducted in secret. Elena's vision was blurring and her hands were shaking as she finally severed her connection to the alien networks. She had accomplished more in 12 hours than most intelligence agencies achieved in decades. Humanity now possessed complete strategic intelligence about their enemies, advanced technology beyond their wildest dreams, and evidence of galactic-scale corruption that would reshape interstellar politics. But Elena's work wasn't finished. The aliens would eventually discover the extent of her infiltration and would likely attempt to capture or eliminate her before she could share more intelligence with Earth. She needed to ensure that her knowledge would survive even if she didn't. Elena began encoding her complete understanding of alien psychology, technology, and politics into a series of educational programs that could be transmitted to Earth and implemented immediately. She had learned things about galactic civilization that took most species centuries to discover, and she was going to give humanity that knowledge as a gift. As Elena worked on her final transmissions, she reflected on the irony of her situation. The quiet girl that everyone had overlooked had just saved her entire species and potentially changed the course of galactic history. The aliens had been so focused on humanity's technological limitations that they had completely missed their greatest strength: the ability to produce individuals who could adapt and overcome impossible odds through pure determination and creative thinking. Elena Vasquez had proved that sometimes the most dangerous weapon in the galaxy was a communications specialist that nobody bothered to notice. The first shots of war had indeed rung out, but they had been fired by humanity, and they had hit their targets with devastating precision. The galaxy would never underestimate the Meek girl species again. 3 days after the failed invasion, the Galactic Council chamber had transformed from a place of confident superiority into a scene of barely controlled chaos. Emergency sessions ran continuously as delegates tried to understand how their perfect plan had become a catastrophic disaster. Elena continued to monitor their communications, while maintaining her cover as an unremarkable human communications specialist. The political aftermath was spreading throughout the galaxy, faster than anyone had anticipated. Elena's broadcast of the genocide evidence had reached hundreds of species, many of whom had their own grievances against the established galactic powers. Rebellions were erupting across dozens of systems as oppressed populations realized that the supposedly benevolent Galactic Council was actually a predatory oligarchy. Elena smiled quietly as she intercepted desperate communications between the three defeated empires. The Vorthak military was demanding explanations for how humans had developed gravitational shielding technology overnight. The Krillian Collective was investigating massive communication security breaches that had compromised their entire fleet coordination. The Saurian Republic was questioning the loyalty of its own allies after their ships had mysteriously received orders to fire on each other. None of them had identified Elena as the source of their problems. To the aliens, she remained invisible, Just another primitive human taking notes while the important delegates discussed galactic politics. Their inability to see the threat sitting right in front of them was perhaps the most damning evidence of their fundamental arrogance. Ambassador. Chen had managed to maintain his diplomatic composure throughout the crisis, but Elena could see the strain in his posture. The ambassador was still processing the implications of the intelligence Elena had shared with him privately. Humanity had gone from being on the verge of extinction to possessing strategic advantages that could reshape galactic civilization, and the transition had happened so quickly that human leadership was struggling to adapt. Dr. Martinez was having an easier time accepting their changed circumstances. As a scientist, she was fascinated by the technological data Elena had acquired and was already working on plans to implement alien technologies for Earth's benefit. Elena had given her detailed specifications for faster-than-light communication systems, advanced medical technologies, and energy production methods that would accelerate human development by centuries. But Elena's attention was focused on a more immediate concern. She had detected increased security activity around the Council Station, and intercepted communications suggested that some alien factions were beginning to suspect that human intelligence capabilities exceeded their assessments. Elena needed to complete her mission and extract her colleagues before their enemies realized what had actually happened. Elena activated her neural interface one final time. Knowing that the effort might cause permanent damage to her consciousness, she had one last task to complete before their enemies discovered the truth. Elena needed to plant false evidence that would misdirect the aliens' investigation and protect humanity's newfound advantages. Elena began creating a sophisticated deception campaign. She planted evidence suggesting that Earth had been secretly aided by an unknown advanced species from outside the galaxy. She fabricated communication logs showing contact with mysterious benefactors who had provided humanity with advanced technology and strategic intelligence. The deception was designed to make the aliens believe that humans were merely pawns in a larger conflict rather than the masterminds of their own defense. The false evidence was carefully crafted to exploit alien psychology. Each species had its own paranoia about external threats, and Elena tailored her fabrications to trigger those specific fears. Dvorthak found evidence of gravitational manipulation that exceeded even their capabilities. The Krillians discovered traces of quantum consciousness interference that suggested beings of pure energy far more advanced than their collective. The Saurians uncovered biological warfare agents that could only have been created by species with millions of years of evolutionary development. Elena's deception campaign succeeded beyond her expectations. Within hours, alien intelligence agencies were reporting the discovery of evidence pointing to intervention by unknown super-advanced beings. The three defeated empires began focusing their investigations on identifying these mysterious puppeteers rather than questioning how primitive humans had orchestrated such an effective defense. But Elena's neural interface was failing rapidly. The sustained quantum manipulation had caused severe damage to her brain tissue, and she could feel her consciousness beginning to fragment. She had perhaps 30 minutes before complete neurological collapse, and she needed to use that time to ensure her colleagues' safe return to Earth. Elena began her final manipulation of the alien communication networks. She created false emergency reports that would draw security attention away from the human delegation, while simultaneously arranging for their immediate departure from the Council Station. She fabricated urgent diplomatic communications that made it appear politically necessary for the humans to return to Earth for consultation with their government. The aliens accepted Elena's manipulated communications without question. They were too distracted by their investigation into the mysterious super-advanced species to pay attention to the departure of three supposedly primitive humans. Elena had successfully convinced them that the real threat came from unknown external forces rather than the quiet girl taking notes in the corner. As Elena worked on the final details of their extraction plan, she received one last communication from Earth. Rebecca Chen had successfully implemented Elena's intelligence data, and humanity was already beginning to construct advanced defensive systems based on alien technology. More importantly, Earth was establishing contact with other oppressed species throughout the galaxy, forming the foundation of an alliance that could challenge the established galactic order. Elena felt a surge of pride as she realized the full scope of what she had accomplished. She had not only saved humanity from genocide, but had given her species the tools and knowledge needed to become a major galactic power. The quiet communications specialist that nobody had noticed had fundamentally altered the balance of power in civilized space. Elena completed her final transmission to Earth, containing everything she had learned about alien psychology, politics, and technology. She included detailed recommendations for humanity's future development and strategic positioning in galactic affairs. Most importantly, she provided warning about the long-term threats that humanity would face as they challenged the established order. As Elena prepared to disconnect from the alien networks permanently, she reflected on the irony of her situation. The species that had dismissed her as primitive and unremarkable had been systematically outmaneuvered by the very qualities they had scorned. Human creativity, adaptability, and determination had proved more valuable than centuries of technological advancement and political sophistication. Elena Vasquez had demonstrated that the galaxy's greatest mistake was underestimating the potential of those they considered weak and irrelevant. The Meek girl had inherited the galaxy, and she was preparing to hand that inheritance to her entire species. The first shots of war had been fired, and humanity had won the opening battle decisively. But Elena knew that the real war was just beginning, and she had given her people everything they needed to see it through to victory. 6 months after the Battle of Sol, Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of humanity's first quantum-capable starship, watching as construction crews put the finishing touches on the Terra Defense Network. The massive orbital platforms bristled with weapons and shields based on technology she had stolen from the Galactic Council's own databases. Earth had transformed from a defenseless backwater planet into one of the most heavily fortified systems in the galaxy. Elena's appearance had changed dramatically since her ordeal at the Council station. The neural interface damage had left her with premature gray streaks in her dark hair and chronic headaches that reminded her daily of the price she had paid for humanity's survival. But her eyes still held the quiet intensity that had made her so dangerous to humanity's enemies. Ambassador Chen approached her position at the viewport, his expression mixing admiration with concern. Elena had become something of a legend among Earth's leadership, though the full details of her actions remained classified at the highest levels. The official story credited humanity's victory to advanced defensive preparations and alien coordination failures, with no mention of the communications specialist who had orchestrated the entire outcome. The Centauri colonies are reporting successful implementation of the new shield systems, Chen informed her. Your technical specifications have allowed us to establish defensive networks throughout human space in record time. Elena nodded, without taking her eyes off the construction activity outside. The aliens are still convinced that unknown super-advanced beings are responsible for our technological leap, she replied quietly. My deception campaign is holding for now, but eventually they'll realize the truth. And when they do? Chen asked. Elena turned to face him, her expression serious. Then they'll understand that they didn't just lose a battle. They lost their monopoly on galactic power. Humanity has become what they feared most, a species capable of challenging their dominance through pure intelligence and determination. Dr. Martinez joined them at the viewport, carrying a datapad filled with Elena's latest intelligence reports. The Alliance networks are expanding faster than we anticipated, she announced. 17 species have joined the Coalition for Galactic Justice based on the evidence Elena broadcast. The Alcoran, the Mashendi, and the Thektar have all suffered under Council oppression and are eager for revenge. Elena had spent the past 6 months establishing communication networks with species throughout the galaxy that had grievances against the established powers. Using the diplomatic codes and contact protocols she had stolen from alien databases, she had built a shadow alliance that spanned dozens of systems. The galaxy's oppressed populations were finally organizing against their oppressors. The Vorthak Empire has lost control of 3 outer systems, Elena reported. The Krillian Collective is facing internal revolts as absorbed species attempt to reclaim their independence. The Saurian Republic's slave colonies are in open rebellion. The evidence of genocide attempts has undermined their legitimacy throughout civilized space. Elena had carefully orchestrated these rebellions by providing oppressed populations with the same intelligence advantages she had given humanity. technical specifications for weapons and shields, strategic intelligence about enemy capabilities, and coordination protocols that allowed scattered resistance groups to operate as unified forces. The galaxy's power structure was crumbling under pressure from enemies who suddenly possessed the knowledge needed to fight back effectively. Ambassador Chen studied the reports with evident satisfaction. The Council's emergency sessions have become permanent crisis management meetings. They're too busy fighting rebellions to organize another attack on Earth. Elena's expression remained serious. Don't underestimate them, she warned. They've survived for millennia by adapting to challenges. Eventually, they'll recognize that I'm the source of their problems and develop countermeasures. We need to be prepared for their response. Elena had been monitoring alien communications constantly, watching for signs that her enemies were beginning to understand the true nature of the threat they faced. So far, her deception campaign had successfully misdirected their investigations, but she could see patterns in their communications that suggested some alien intelligence analysts were beginning to question the official explanations. What's our next move? Dr. Martinez asked. Elena had been planning humanity's next step since the day she returned from the council station. We accelerate the timeline, she declared. Humanity needs to become too powerful to attack directly before they figure out what really happened. I'm recommending immediate expansion into the Orion Arm and establishment of forward bases in neutral territory. Elena's strategic vision was breathtakingly ambitious. Rather than remaining on the defensive, she wanted humanity to become an active galactic power with the capability to project force throughout local space. The technology she had stolen would allow humans to build ships and weapons comparable to anything the established empires possessed. The Galactic Council will view expansion as an act of aggression, Chen pointed out. Elena smiled grimly. They were planning to commit genocide against us 6 months ago. Everything we do now is self-defense. She activated a holographic display showing her analysis of galactic political trends. The old order is dying. The question is whether humanity will help shape what replaces it, or be destroyed by those who want to maintain the status quo. Elena's analysis was proving accurate. Throughout the galaxy, the revelation of the Council's true nature had undermined the foundations of interstellar civilization. Species that had accepted Council authority for centuries were questioning every aspect of their relationships with the established powers. Trade networks were disrupting, military alliances were dissolving, and political structures were collapsing. I've been in contact with the Zentorian resistance movement, Elena continued. They're planning to overthrow their government and withdraw from the Council. The Alcorn Republic is considering military action against Vorthak occupation forces. The Meshendi clans are organizing a liberation fleet to free their enslaved populations. Elena had become the center of a galactic intelligence network that dwarfed anything the established powers had ever created. Her ability to intercept and decode alien communications, combined with her understanding of galactic politics, had made her humanity's most valuable strategic asset. She was coordinating resistance movements across dozens of species, while simultaneously guiding human expansion into former Council territory. What about the risks? Dr. Martinez asked. If they discover your role in all this, Elena's expression hardened. Then they'll learn why underestimating humans was their fatal mistake. She gestured toward the defensive platforms outside. I've given humanity the tools to survive and thrive in a hostile galaxy. Whether we use them wisely is up to all of us. Elena had accomplished something unprecedented in galactic history. A single individual from a supposedly primitive species had infiltrated the most secure facilities in civilized space, stolen their most valuable secrets, and orchestrated the downfall of an empire that had ruled for millennia. She had proved that intelligence and determination could overcome any technological advantage. As Elena continued monitoring the galaxy's transformation, she reflected on how much had changed since she sat quietly in the council chamber, dismissed as irrelevant by beings who considered themselves her superiors. The Meek girl they had ignored had risen to become one of the most powerful individuals in galactic civilization, and she was just getting started. Elena Vasquez had heard the first shots of war and had responded by firing back with weapons the enemy never saw coming. Now she was preparing for the next phase of humanity's emergence as a galactic power, knowing that the quiet communication specialist who had started this revolution would see it through to its conclusion. The galaxy had underestimated her once. They would never make that mistake again.